Remote access VPN using Ike. In this nugget, we're going to discuss how to set up a remote access VPN using the Checkpoint Secure Client software, and we're going to cover the following concepts. We're going to look at why we want to use Ike as a remote VPN option in our environments, terminating on our Checkpoint firewalls. Then we will get into the actual gateway configuration, where we will set up the step-by-step configs required to get that VPN running on our gateway. Then we will look at some rule-based construction on how to pass that VPN traffic through our security rule base to make sure it gets encrypted and to make sure that it works as it should be. And we will look at the actual secure client installation next, where we will actually install the secure client software on a host, and then we will use that secure client software to build a VPN site to construct the connection that we're going to need to get us into that remote VPN. And then we will cover the actual verification process of that VPN inside a SmartView tracker. That way we can see exactly how the connection is being established, and to give us some great troubleshooting steps for any kind of connectivity failures that any of our users may have. So let's move on from here, take some wonderful notes, and we're going to enjoy Remote Access VPN. Alright everyone, we are going to set up a remote access VPN in this particular nugget. So let's go over the steps that we need to put in place in order to get this secure client based VPN working for us, to give our employees complete connectivity no matter where they are in the world. So the first thing we want to do is review the process and the concepts that make up this remote access VPN. So let's dive into the global properties, and then we'll look at some community settings. So if we go to policy, we'll go to global properties, and we'll select remote access. Now under remote access, we have a few choices here, and let's review those. The first one here has to do with topology updates. And what is that going to do for us? Well, basically the topology updates are downloaded to the client on a regular basis. So what I would normally suggest that most people do is select update your topology every 168 hours. That should be enough. And what that's going to do, if there's any internal changes in your network based on the encryption domain for this particular remote access user, maybe you add a new network or some new host, or you spin up some new servers, you want all that type of information to be available to the user inside of a file called user.c.c. In the user.c.c file, it's going to tell the remote client or the remote laptop, for example, what type of networks are behind the security gateway, so when it needs to encrypt data, it knows about the correct networks and it can encrypt it properly. So what we're going to do, we're going to set ours to 168 hours for topology update. That'll be perfectly fine to get the information updated on a regular basis. And now we're going to look at our authentication timeout. So you need to make another decision here. On the authentication timeout, it's typically going to match your Ike Phase 1 values. You can set it to use default value of 1 day. The default value most people will use in the Internet Key Exchange value is going to be 1 day, or 86,400 typically. What we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and set this to, let's go ahead and have it expire for us every 120 minutes is what it's saying. So that's going to give us roughly 2 hours when our users are authenticated, just in case they forget to disconnect from the office or from a remote branch office or even from home. We're going to go ahead and knock them off our VPN, so we're not having dormant tunnels that are just sitting there without someone actively using them and taking up the resources on our gateways. We also have an option right here for allowing the caching of static passwords on our clients. I'm not going to recommend that we do that, but that basically would give us the ability, should you have multiple remote access gateways. Maybe you have an office in Tampa, or an office in Florida, or an office in Oregon, for example, and your users travel around to these offices. You could set this type of information up so whenever they're in the office or needing to connect to that particular gateway, they can use the cache information. That way they don't have to re-enter their password. But we're going to be of strong security and strong authentication types, and we're going to make sure that our users do authenticate based on the parameters that we're going to set up in this particular nugget, no matter where they are or where they're connecting. So we're going to leave this open for now, leave it as its default value of it unchecked, and we're going to look at some additional properties here. Now we have an option here to enable back connections. Now back connections are an interesting property. And basically what we need to know about it is usually communication with remote access must be initialized by the clients. However, once a client has opened a connection, the host behind the VPN can open or return a back connection to the client for connection properties. Well, where I have used this and where it can be very valuable for you is support of your remote access community users. Let's say, for example, you're working on a help desk and you have a remote user that says, hey, I'm really having a problem getting a document or something to work, and they call into the help desk and say, hey, I'm on VPN, but, I just can't make this document work like I want it to. Having the back connections option available to them, we can turn that on, and that's going to give your help desk the ability to launch maybe a terminal service or some type of screen controlling type software in order to allow them to take control of that user's desktop so they can assist them in troubleshooting like document issues or anything that they're having a problem with while they're out of the office and connected to VPN. This is a good option to use, and I definitely recommend that you do turn that on for your remote users just to give you the support ability to help them out while they're out of the office. So we'll go ahead and turn that on as well. And then we have an option here to encrypt our DNS traffic. Now where you're typically going to see this, if you're forcing DNS servers down to your users, we can decide whether our DNS queries sent by our remote clients to our DNS servers on the inside of our network need to be encrypted. It's a good idea to go ahead and do that in the day of DNS spoofing attacks, and a lot of different types of attacks of DNS cache poisoning is another really popular attack that people like to do against DNS servers. And basically what that's going to do, you may think you're going to google.com, but they're actually going through and redirecting you to Johnny Hacker's website. So you go to that website, you run a query, you put information in it, and it looks just like you're going to Google or whatever website, but they're actually launching a keyboard logger on that particular portal they directed you to, and they're collecting all that information. So encrypting your DNS traffic is a really good idea, and in my opinion it's a best security practice, and you really should be doing it. So we'll turn that on, and then we have an option here for VPN 1 Secure Client Logon High Availability, where you will see this option. If you have multiple Smart Center servers deployed in your environment like we do, we can set this up so maybe our primary Smart Center server is dead in the water, but we want our remote clients to be able to get topology information and to update their desktop security policy and everything from our backup management server. In our case, like our Nugget management backup server. So we will turn that option as well to make sure that our remote clients have the ability to do so if we have a problem, and also to be able to download our desktop security policy information from our backup Smart Center server. So a really good idea to have that on as well. And the last option we're going to see right here, where we can option, basically we have a VPN 1 Secure Client Desktop expiration time. Now we can revert our default policy after 60 minutes. Now we're going to take a look at that as we build our desktop security policy, and we'll get that in place and get it working for us as well. So the next thing that we want to take a look at on this particular screen, we have a few other options here that are under VPN that I want you to review. If we click on VPN, we have the option of a simplified mode to all new security policies recommended setup for VPN communities. We're going to go ahead and leave that the default value for now for all of our VPNs, whether they be remote access or if they are actual site-to-site type VPNs. We'll go ahead and leave that value in place, and I just wanted you guys to see that. Now let's cover the next value that we really need to know about in our global properties for VPN, and that is located under the VPN Advanced section. Now as we see at the top here, we have secure remote, secure client behavior while disconnected. we have the option of when disconnected, traffic to the encryption domain will be dropped or sent in the clear. Where this becomes a problem for you, and I have seen it 100 times, if you have remote access set up on an employee's laptop and they're in the office, and all of a sudden you get that phone call saying, hey, I'm in my docking station, I'm connected, I can do everything that I would normally try to do, but some things aren't working properly, or I can't get to some destinations on the network where I should be able to. This value right here can bite you pretty hard. And this is where we want to make this change. When disconnected, physically disconnected from our VPN, we're going to have information running in the taskbar, as we'll see with the little lock icon or little key icon for our secure client, as it has encryption domain information. So when disconnected, the traffic to the encryption domain will be sent in the clear. If it's set on dropped, you're going to have some issues, and I do recommend you set it to this value and you'll be perfectly fine. Now we have another option here for hub mode. Now what this is basically going to do, it's going to route all traffic to this particular gateway when connected. So if you're at home, or you're at a coffee shop, or a remote office, or even at an airport, for example, whenever you connect up to the network, internet-based traffic will typically go out the internet pipe and take that path. Now using hub mode, you're going to say that everything's going to come through the VPN. So once the user connects, if they want to go to Yahoo or Google or something on the inside of the network, it doesn't matter. Everything is going to go through the VPN tunnel when using hub mode. Now this is a pretty good idea, and you might want to do that for your employees, just in case you want to make sure when they connect to VPN, you are totally securing all of their communications. So good idea. And you might want to turn that on for your employees. Just an option. We're not going to use it in this particular nugget, but I wanted you to be aware of it and know that it's there if you need to use hub mode. Now we have some other settings here. This is other settings for secure client, NG, AI, R56 and above. Now we can disconnect the client when getting an IP from a VPN domain. So what does this mean? Basically what it's doing is it gives us that seamless effect of office boundaries don't have to be a problem. Let's say you're on your contractor network at work, you're connected to the VPN, and you migrate after the meeting saying, okay, I've met with these vendors, we're off the contractor network, and we're back, and we're walking back to our office area, and we get back to our desk, we put our laptop back in the docking station. As soon as that DHCP request hits and it realizes that it has an IP address from its encryption domain based on the user c.c values, what it's going to do, it's just going to say, hey, disconnect that VPN. I know I'm in a nice and safe and secure place. And that's something that's really cool and a good option to have as well. So, good idea. Definitely make sure it's turned on. And the next one is allow users to save troubleshooting logs. Very important as well. That way, in the secure client settings, if the user says, hey, I'm having a problem while I'm connected to VPN, go ahead and let them do that. That way you can actually get a tracking of the logs that are going to take place from the client coming toward your checkpoint gateway. And the last one we have here is for office mode. Now we have an option to use the first allocated office mode IP address for all connections to the gateway of the site. So what this is going to say is it's basically going to turn that office mode IP address into a hub address for all of the connections coming inbound to the particular site. Now I'm not going to turn that on for now, but the option is there, and you can use it if you feel a need to do so. So what are we going to do at this point? We're going to actually get into the actual VPN community. We're going to build a connection over to our Nugget Firewall B, get the remote access community set up, get the users community set up, get all the groups in place, and then we'll get our actual remote access VPN connection working, so when employees are out of the office, they have the connectivity that they need. So let's go ahead and hit OK here. Now the first thing, we're going to go ahead and jump into this VPN area, and we already have an option here for remote access VPN. So we're going to open this up, and under participating gateways, we're going to go ahead and add our Nugget Firewall B into it. Alright, looks great. Now it says participating user groups. So let's go ahead and hit OK here, and we're going to need to go into manage users and administrators, and we're going to create us an actual user group to use with this remote access VPN. So we'll do new, and we're going to do user group, and we're going to call this particular user group Ike-based VPN ones. That'll work for us. We can use that. We can do Ike underscore VPN underscore remote. That'll work. And then we'll choose a color of blue. Looks good. And then we have a user here for Joseph. We'll go ahead and add Joseph into this particular group, and we'll hit OK here. Now, the reason why you see this SSL VPN group, this is a group that we're going to be using later on in this particular series, or earlier, depending on where this particular nugget falls in the series. But it's basically for our SSL network extender portion of remote connectivity. But we're going to go ahead and leave that in place for now. We have our VPN remote. We have our user Joseph already put in here. So we'll hit close on this for now, and we can go manage users and administrators again. We see Joseph. We can edit this, and we can see that under authentication, we can see Joseph's profile is going to use a checkpoint password for authentication. Now we can see some additional areas here where we can put him in particular groups. We can see he's in these two groups. Certificates, if we wanted him to do certificate-based authentication, we can do that. We can set up a time value to limit the time that Joseph is able to connect to our network. That's fully available. Would we trust him? We're going to give him 7x24 access to the network, so that looks good for now. We have some personal information here. It says expiration date of this account, December 31st, 2030. That's plenty of time. With some general information for the username, and we have some location filtering abilities if we wanted to filter what this particular user can access. But we'll go ahead and hit cancel for now. Close this, open our remote access again, go to participating user groups, click add the VPN remote group in. Alright, looks great, and we'll hit OK here. Now, we have this portion of it figured out. We have our VPN remote users connecting to Nugget Firewall B, and they're going to connect to the remote interface of this particular firewall. So just like any of the VPN areas that we're going to talk about in this particular CCSE series, what we're going to look at is the actual link interface information. That's important. So under actual Nugget Firewall B, what we'll do is actually expand VPN and go to link selection. Now link selection here should always be set to the public interface typically. If you have multiple public interfaces facing the internet that remote users can hit across the internet, you have a choice here where you can actually select it. But most of the time I usually just select the external interface that's available. Most firewalls are going to have one. Every now and then you might run into a firewall that has multiple public interfaces, but we'll choose that for now, so that looks good. So whenever our remote users come across our internet segment, they'll hit this particular IP interface of 172.20.20.30, and they'll build their remote VPN to it. So we'll hit OK here. Now that looks good. We'll go ahead and save this, and now we have half the battle done. Now we need to think about another option that we want to add to this particular VPN, and that's going to be the option of a desktop security policy. Now a desktop security policy is going to give us the ability to place some kind of filtering abilities on top of our users. So let's build our desktop security policy to be placed on top of our Nugget Firewall B policy in order to get that remote filtering capabilities that we want for our remote access users. So what we need to do is go to File, and then we'll choose Add Policy to Package, and we'll choose Desktop Security Policy or Package, and we'll hit OK. And what we're going to see is we get a new tab here for desktop. So what are we going to do here? We're actually going to set up some filtering rules to state when inbound rules coming inbound, these are the type of connections can be made, and whenever going outbound, these are the type of connections that can be made. So just like any time a security policy we will deal with in the security area or the NAT area, we'll just go to Rules, Add Rule at the top, and we're going to say source is any desktop all users service that we're going to use is going to be a particular service. Maybe we're going to allow these particular users to use the remote desktop protocol. We're going to accept that, and we're going to log that. We're also going to allow them to do DNS type packets because they got to have that to get to internal resources. And we're also going to be able to allow ICMP requests just in case they need to ping particular servers when they're connected. And then we're also going to allow some web surfing as well. So we'll do HTTP and we'll do HTTPS. Alright, looks good. Alright, let's put HTTP back in. Alright, looks great. So we have our users, all users at any, source is any. This looks fine. Now our outbound rules, what are we going to allow here? So let's say from here we'll do rules, add rule at the top, and we're going to say we're going to do some filtering here. We're going to say that inbound rules you can do these type of areas and connections, but on an outbound rule for our remote access users, we're not going to allow them to issue a type of connection, maybe an SSH for example, being as if we don't want them being able to SSH back to their computers at home, for example, while they're on the VPN. That way they're not instigating any kind of connectivity problems or a potential security event should something get on their home network and then they bring it into the corporate network by making a connection on the VPN, and then someone takes over their home connection, comes inbound, and all kinds of chaos could ensue. So we'll go ahead and block that type of connection for SSH, and we're going to go ahead and log that as well, and then we'll do a save on this particular policy, and that looks good. Now, the next thing that we need to do is we need to set up an actual security rule or security policy to state that whenever our remote users come inbound, they are allowed to connect. So right above our stealth rule here is where I usually like to add my VPN rule. So we'll do rules, add rule above this particular rule, and we're going to call this one remote VPN. Alright, looks great. Alright, and now our source is going to be add user access. Choose our actual IKE VPN remote users. Hit OK. And our destination is going to be this particular security community. This destination can be any, but on the VPN is where you need to lock it down. So we'll do edit cell. Only connections in a particular community is what we want. We'll do add remote access. Hit OK. Hit OK there. We're going to accept this connection. We're definitely going to log it. Services that are available on VPN coming inbound, we'll just match those up to what we had earlier. So we'll say add, and that's going to be DNS type. And we'll add ICMP. Looks good. Let's add HTTP. And HTTPS. We'll do them one at a time. Alright, let's do HTTP as well. Okay? And I believe we had DNS on there as well. It's already used, it says. Okay, we already have it in there. Alright, so let's compare that. So we have remote desktop, DNS, ICMP, HTTPS, and HTTP. So let's add remote desktop, and that should get the job done. Alright. Remote desktop protocol. Alright, so actually we already have it right here. Let's just go ahead and drag this around for us. Alright, looks good. Now we have that. Alright. Well, it looks like we have this remote desktop already in place here. So let's go ahead and actually put this down on this remote rule right here. And what we're going to do is that looks pretty good. We have all of these particular options. We have all these services in place. Let's do another verification to see that we have remote desktop, DNS, ICMP, HTTP, and HTTPS. Let's compare that on our security rule. Real audio we didn't need, so let's take that out. And that looks pretty good for me at this point. Alright, so now we save this particular policy. And now we're going to do a policy install, and we're going to push this policy out to Nugget Firewall B. So once we push this out to Nugget Firewall B, we'll be able to dive into the desktop client side of this particular Nugget, where we are going to actually install Secure Client on top of a Windows XP host that is located outside of the inside of this particular network, where this network, if we go back to the review of our network diagram, would be the 10.20.30 internal network. We're going to be connecting over the 172.20.20.30 connection. So something on our internet segment coming inbound to Nugget Firewall B will build an actual tunnel to it, and then we'll get our connectivity in place, get Joseph connected, and allow him to be able to use these particular protocols, and we'll control exactly what he can do based on the security rule coming inbound and the desktop security rule to state while he's on VPN, this is essentially the type of things that are going to be enforced on top of him. So this should just take a couple minutes for it to push the policy out, and once it's pushed, as we can see, it completed successfully. We'll close this, we'll save this, and now we're going to dive into installing our network client software, and that's going to be Checkpoint Secure Client software. So let's sit back and get that installed. One additional step I like to do before we dive into our actual secure client configuration is go ahead and add a section title to this particular rule, just to separate our firewall management and our stealth rule and our actual VPN rule. So we'll do add section title above, and we'll call this one, just like our rule, the remote VPN section title. Alright, so that looks good, and we can see that this is right below it, and we have stealth, and we have our firewall management up here. So it looks great. We'll go ahead and save this, and now we'll dive into our actual configuration of that secure client. And now we're going to install our VPN1 secure client. Now you can obtain this from your Windows CD for R65, or you can obtain this directly from the Checkpoint website. Now this used to be a free download, but based on some actual rules and things that came down toward Checkpoint, they had to make this an actual sign-in type service to get this. So you may have to ask for a trial for this, or if you can get a copy of the actual R65 trial media, it'll actually be on the Windows CD. And you can actually try the products on Checkpoint's website and be able to get a free copy of that particular media. So what we're going to do is go ahead and open this particular option, and we're using the R60 HFA02 Supplement 3 Secure Client version, which is completely compatible with R65. So let's go ahead and run the installer here, and it's going to ask us where do we want to install it. We accept the license term. It's perfectly fine. We're going to install the secure client. That way we can take advantage of office mode for routing our IPs through our particular security gateway. But the option for secure remote, the main thing is that it just did not offer office mode, and it was an older technology that a lot of people were using as a remote access option. But we'll go ahead and select next for now, and we'll install it. And this will just take a couple minutes and allow it to run through the actual installation process, and then we'll actually go through and reboot our client. And then after you reboot your client, we'll come up and you should have a little lock icon down in your taskbar, and then we'll be good from there. Now, I know everyone is anxious to get connected to the Secure Client VPN, but there is one parameter I gotta let you guys know about before we do connect. And we'll see this a couple times through this particular series, and that is an option called Office Mode. Now for Office Mode, this is going to help us alleviate any routing problems when connecting to our remote access connectivity into our Checkpoint VPN gateways. If we open up Nugget Firewall B and we actually expand the remote access section, we'll see an option for Office Mode. Now Office Mode right now is set up to offer Office Mode to this particular group. If we hit the drop down, we'll see the option for all of our groups that we have configured on this particular Smart Center server. But we're going to, just to help alleviate this particular problem, we're going to set it to all Office Mode users. So if we actually build different types of remote access communities or groups down the road, we'll already have our actual office mode section taken care of for Nugget Firewall B. So we're going to tell us to allow office mode to all users. In our office mode group, we can manage that and look at details. It's a 172.16.0/24, so it's going to assign IPs from this range. And we'll go ahead and close off of that and hit OK. Save this for now, and now we can dive into our actual secure client configuration. Alright guys, once we're connected up on our external client on the outside of our firewall for testing, when you install your actual VPN1 client, you're going to see an actual icon right here where it will say Checkpoint VPN1 Secure Client. If we double click on this, it's going to tell us that no sites are defined. Do you want to define a site? We'll select yes for now, and we're going to choose the actual IP address of that particular Nugget Firewall B on the outside, which is 172.20.20.30, and we'll hit next. Username and password for authentication. We're going to log in as our user Joseph, and we'll put his password in. Now we'll select next. Now there is an additional option I want to show you here. We see Secure Client will now obtain information from your server. Click Advanced only if you experience networking difficulties using standard settings. Now standard settings are basically going to try to use IKE parameters in order to gain your site information. Now under Advanced, we have the option where we hit next. What we can actually see is we see use visitor mode or perform IKE over TCP. So typically whenever you're building a site, if you have any kind of restrictive firewalls or anything internet based that's blocking you from retrieving that site information, if you actually choose use visitor mode, it'll actually try to obtain that information using an actual 443 connection, just in case any kind of IKE parameters are being blocked toward that particular firewall, and like we would see in our type of option as well. So we're going to set this to use visitor mode. We're going to do next, and what we're going to see is we're going to have an internal CA certificate fingerprint from this particular IP from Nugget Firewall B issued by the Nugget Management Server. We'll select next, and it says your site has been created successfully. We're in great shape, so we'll click finish, and it asks us, do we want to connect now? Now I want you to notice by default what we're going to see is we have our user filled out, we have our location profile, and our destination. We have a couple options here, because what it's going to do is as it builds a particular file called the user c.c file, it's going to notice that these particular firewalls both have the actual VPN option turned on them. They actually have VPN connectivity set up. And even though that we actually took our firewall B and put it in the remote access community, it did recognize that VPN was available on the Nugget cluster as well. But we're going to connect to Nugget Firewall B, so let's go ahead and pull that up for now. And we're going to go ahead and log in as our particular user Joseph, and we'll connect. And it'll say user Joseph authenticated by Firewall 1 authentication. Connection succeeded. We're in good shape. So we can click on details, we can see some additional options right here. We'll hit OK, and the next thing you want to be able to do is go to your actual status area, and it'll show you that you're connected. Your remaining time says you have about 2 hours based on those parameters that we saw earlier for cutting our users off after 120 minutes. And we have our duration, we have our security policy here, and it's just saying no policy is currently downloaded, and it's not verified. So it needs to take the option to actually go through and download the security policy, and sometimes that can take a little bit, and it's based on an actual licensing structure that you have on your gateway before that'll work properly. But the option's there, and when it does download an actual security policy, you'll see information about it right here. Now we can look at our log viewer, and our actual log viewer is going to be a nice way of troubleshooting this type of connection. We can see that the default logging policy was loaded, communication with the site, disconnected, user Joseph successfully authenticated. All that option is there. So we can clean off this particular log, close it for now. If we go into advanced and we go to activity, we can do our activity viewer where we can see the actual encrypted and decrypted packets going into this particular VPN connection. We can see our packets information and our packets of error if we're having any types of connectivity. So as a support professional, you might want to become very familiar with all these different support options just in case any of your users have remote connectivity problems, you can assist them. So we'll close off of this for now. Now, under connection details, if you're ever needing to remote into your users, just have them go under this connection details box and look for the assigned IP. And you'll see 172.16.0.1. So from that office mode pool, we have assigned Joseph this particular IP address. Now, if we go under Nugget Firewall B here, we have some tunnel properties, and it's going to tell us, is UDP encapsulation on? Yes. Visitor mode, we're not doing that. Tunnel active, yes. IP compression, no. IKE over TCP, no. And route all traffic through the gateway, no. And office mode, yes. Now, all these areas of what we see right here are exactly what we would see under the VPN advanced values on the Nugget Firewall B properties. So we are in great shape right there. Let's look at the tunnel MTU properties, and it says status is succeeded, discovery time is 1 second, and the tunnel maximum transmission unit is 1350. Now under our connection info, we can see status connected through this particular IP. This is our current IP. Office mode, it gives us that. Connection profile settings, we can see general profile settings. We see all this particular information that's available. Our selected gateway is this, but profile says any gateway. Advanced options, we have a few of them right here for support office mode, support IKE over TCP, force UDP encapsulation, visitor mode, and route all traffic. And we have our other connection settings for tunnel MTU discovery. So all that's in great shape. We are connected at this point. So from the outside, let's see exactly what we're going to see. So as we dive into our DOS window, let's issue a netstat -rn, and we're going to pull up our actual routing table. Right off the bat, what do we see right here? Checkpoint virtual network adapter for secure client. And what we can see is that we have actual routes that were injected into this particular network. So we have 172.16.0.0. The gateway is 172.16.0.1, which is this client. And we see the particular routes here that are going to allow us to communicate back in. So let's say, for example, let's just try to ping. And it says network problem encountered. And it was disconnected. So what happened is we actually lost connectivity at that point. So that would be a troubleshooting opportunity where you can go in, check your logs, have your user give you the information that we just talked about in order to resolve that connection problem. So let's go ahead and try to connect again just to see what's going on here. Maybe something actually got bumped in the connectivity, and let's see if we can get back in. It says user Joseph was authenticated by the Firewall 1 authentication succession on the connection succeeded, so we're in good shape. And let's just try to ping something on the gateway side, which is 10.20.30.2. And we can ping it. We can ping the inside interface of Nugget Firewall B, so we have complete connectivity. We set up our connection. We got our policies in place. We got everything in place. We set up our actual connection through Secure Client. We made it to Nugget Firewall B, and we're connected. So we're in great shape. So that is the basic and the information that you really need to know about using your Secure Client option as a remote access VPN. Well guys, we saw the client side of everything. Now I want to show you exactly what happened in SmartView Tracker when we connected. It's some pretty interesting information. You should be able to see the same thing on your own lab environments or in your own workplace. So what we're going to see is, by default, we see reason client encryption authenticated by internal password for Joseph was connected from this IP to Nugget Firewall B. Now we hit next, and we can see we're going to see IKE main mode sent notification responder lifetime. We're actually seeing an actual key install. Now the next thing we have IKE main mode process has actually been completed for this particular user. We hit next, and what do we see here? Reason user authenticated by firewall sending SSL encrypted topology using IKE authentication. So that whole visitor mode concept I was talking about, being able to deliver the actual topology over 443 from your gateway back to the client, that's how it was actually doing it. Now if we hit next, we can see that's authenticated by internal password. Hit next again, same thing with IKE main mode completion. And what do we have? here's the other option that's very important in your troubleshooting steps. And whenever you get that call saying, hey, I got connected, something isn't working right, or anything like that, we have the source IP, we have the user, and we actually have the MAC address. How great is that, that it can actually pull the MAC address for this particular user and state that, yeah, I actually assigned 172.16.0 to this user for 900 seconds for lease time, and here's the MAC address if you want to troubleshoot some things. Really great information. And we see our quick mode completion, and it's going to negotiate this particular networks, and we have this particular office mode IP shown, and we can see ICMP redirect packets are not being allowed at that point. That's perfectly fine. We see our key install. We see some things going out to some chatter for multicast traffic, and here is our first actual real packet. We have our source being the office mode IP. When we try to issue the actual ping packet toward Nugget Firewall B's internal interface, we saw that it decrypted that particular packet, and then we were able to actually connect at that point. And we see some other things that are going on here, but the main thing that I want you to see is the whole process that it actually takes when we connect from the client side to the actual firewall. It makes this connection, it tells you the information, and that's why Checkpoint is such a great option for VPN, whether that be site-to-site or a remote access solution, because you have complete visibility. As we can see right here in Smart View Tracker, this gives us all the information that we need to know to troubleshoot the situation, get our users connected, and it's going to work well for us. In this nugget on remote access VPN using IKE, I hope we learned a ton of information here. I hope I instilled the skills and the confidence in you to know that you could take this type of technology and be able to deploy it in any organization today to get remote access VPN working for your employees. As part of this nugget, we covered why we wanted to use this remote access VPN, why we need to effectively give our users a way to connect to the office no matter where they are at in the world. And that's the main reason why we want to use an IKE-based remote VPN, because it's going to give us our complete security structure, but it's also going to give us the flexibility to allow our users to travel or to connect from multiple locations. We looked at the actual gateway configuration, where we went through all the steps required in order to get that remote access VPN configured inside a smart dashboard. We looked at our actual rule-based construction, where we built a brand new rule to allow this traffic to be encrypted, and we looked at our VPN community that we configured to also allow this construction to work through the VPN process. And then we looked at the actual secure client installation, where we installed this on a host and then connected to the external IP address of our B firewall to get the connection in place. And then we looked at the actual VPN site construction using secure client, and we looked at some troubleshooting steps and some actual information that we're going to be able to pull from that IKE client or from the actual secure client software. And then we looked at the actual verification of this whole process inside a Smart View Tracker. So I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.